My name is Molly Connolly. Nice to meet everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces. The other thing that's been neat is there's so many new faces here. So I'm interested to see, they didn't do how many people it's your first DevCon, but it seems like there's a lot of new faces, so I'm excited about that. I've been a FileMaker developer for 20 years now. So this is my company's Thorsen Consulting. I do FileMaker development. I'm based in the Chicago area. And I also have two other programs. One is Jumpstart. Oh, look, I'm seeing more familiar faces. This is great. One's Jumpstart FM. And that came out of this idea that we were all looking for people, but were too busy to train them. Right? So I've got a virtual program. I'll tell you about that. And basically, I'm just going to share what I do in that training class so that you can go back and replicate it for yourselves. And then I also have a membership group called Elusive Moose. This is more the business side, right? So it's not the technical side, it's all the details of running your business. Estimating, marketing, hiring, firing, all that kind of customer service. So I'll mention some ideas from there too that could be helpful. All right, so we're here because you either have a junior developer, you're thinking about hiring someone. I also want to talk about, if you're thinking about it, let's frame it, are you asking the right question? Right? Is the junior developer right for me? How many people are currently now or have been in a situation where you're so busy, you don't know what to do with yourself, your clients are angry, you can't keep up, you're working probably more than you should? All right, so if you are in the thick of that, right, that's probably not the right time to hire a junior developer, because what does a junior developer need? Attention, training, and they're not going to be able to immediately jump in. So a lot of times what I say to people when you're at that kind of panic point, right, where you're like, ooh, and everybody says, ooh, it's a good problem to be busy. Yes, we are very lucky to, live in a world where FileMaker developers are in demand, but this good problem needs to be solved. So a lot of times I'll recommend, get a sub. Get a sub who's talented, help you through that period, and maybe at the same time hire a junior so that down the line they can help you out. So think about what are your growth plans? What types of tasks do you need help with? How's your cash flow? Right? It might just make a lot more sense to hire somebody that you can bill right away. And what kind of expertise do you need? So if you go through those questions and you go, you know what? I can make the time. There's never enough time, but you say, I can make the time to invest in this person, and I'm not at that critical point where it's going to take away from some of the problems I'm having. Like you've had a situation where the clients are really breathing down your neck and you haven't been able to deliver, get some other kind of help. But then you say, all right, I'm going to hire a junior. What am I going to look for? I love this picture. Some of you know Jesse Barnum, 360 Works. So Jesse's a perfect example of someone with just a level of humility and confidence to ask questions. You go to any session with him, he's asking questions, he's being inquisitive, he's creative, he's not afraid of looking stupid, right? And so he sets this culture with his junior developers that hey, ask the questions, let's talk about it, let's figure it out. I don't want you to sit in a corner trying to figure it out yourself for a whole day when I can help you, I can guide you along. So what I always say is when you're looking for a junior, first of all, you might get lucky and have somebody with a little FileMaker experience, but let's say you're hiring somebody right out of college. What are you looking for? You want somebody who is going to be inquisitive, humble about their experience. They can say, hey, here's what I've done, here's what I like, but they're not bragging about it in an interview, right? You want somebody who's curious. I always look for people with customer service skills. Right, the Apple Genius Bar people are awesome because they know how to problem solve, they know how to talk to people, they know how to keep things moving. And then when you're asking them questions, ask them, they don't know FileMaker, fine, but ask them to give you examples of solving technical problems, right? We've all got them now. Oh, I fixed this on my iPhone, I know this about Excel, here's a problem I solved. And even if they don't have technical expertise, because some of the best developers I've hired have been a guy with a degree in Spanish, right? Sometimes you go for Spanish and math, then it's really good, right? Or another one, how many musicians are in the room? Yeah, right? That's kind of an obvious one. So that for some reason that music really translates. But have them give you an example of technical problem solving. And then you're going to create this culture. You've got somebody who's going to be able to work with you and ask questions and not be afraid to learn. Now, one other thing that's interesting, because we're all at DevCon, because we've worked with developers, there's a lot of people who have really great technical skills, but maybe not the great customer interaction skills. And that's fine. If you're hiring a high-level person who already knows how to program and you can work around that, maybe they shouldn't talk to the client. Maybe I'll just feed them the work. You can't afford to do that with a junior. Your junior needs to be very socially skilled because you don't know what their technical skills are going to be. You've got to find someone that you can talk to, that you feel real comfortable with, or if you have somebody else who's going to train them, somebody who can say, okay, I can work with this person. The highly technical with no social skills is a different animal. All right, how do I find a junior? I just walked around right before this session and I forgot this one on my slide. I love it when people say, I'm promoting somebody within the organization, right? The admin assistant shows a lot of potential, or somebody who's been working at the help desk. So if you have that luxury, that's a really great thing, and we'd love to see you kind of growing somebody internally. But a couple other things, and I do want to point out, a junior doesn't, a lot of times we say, oh, hire a junior, and you think it's got to be a college kid. I've had a lot of luck with people going into a second career, right? And the great thing about them is, again, maybe they don't know FileMaker, but they know how to work, right? They know how to, they know the ways of work. They probably have subject matter expertise. And so that's interesting. Don't limit yourself to say, oh, I just have to advertise at the local college. Put it out there, Craigslist, Indeed. Obviously, you're going to advertise locally because you're not going to move somebody, right, for a junior position. And then the other thing is, am I guess from Kalos here? Yeah, so over the years I've done some recruiting, but I'm not a recruiter, I'm a FileMaker developer who happens to know a lot of people. So I've teamed up with these guys in back and they've got a booth, Kalos, and they do recruiting, right? And now they've got a whole chunk of people, that's probably not the way to say it, right? Stable, there we go. Sometimes you get caught up here. So they've got a stable of people to work with, all right? So you can talk to them about different ideas and how they do it. All right, how much do you pay this person? Don't want anybody to get mad out here. Like we did some surveys, we have an idea, but again, it depends on what the overall package is. So in general, what I've seen, kind of depending on where you're at in the country, is maybe 40 or 50,000 a year. One of the big things I encourage people to do is if you're hiring a junior, have a big pay increase tied to certification. Because what's going to happen is then you want them to be certified because it really demonstrates their knowledge of the product, but it's going to highly motivate them to, work on the weekend and, do a little more studying to move that forward. You're offering flexibility, you're offering professional development perks. Again, the guys from Kalos, they've got this kind of quick salary survey. You can stop by their booth and take a look at this, but just to give you an idea of, what are you supposed to pay this person? Now, obviously, we all are good at math, and we know that hiring a junior is ultimately going to be a lot more profitable than the technical leads, right? So it's nice if you can build up your own stable. All right, next big thing. And again, a lot of this information is coming from my own experience, not quite doing it right, So over the years, I used to have a team of like 15 people, and we would hire interns, and we would just give them a copy of the FileMaker book that we wrote at Soliant, and put them in a corner and be like, hey, maybe they'll learn FileMaker. They can just read. It's an intern. It's not really the best way to do it. So what we've come up with is set the expectations right away. All right, we're hiring in 3 months. We're going to have a review. Now, I would argue that you will know in a month if this person is going to work out or not, but it's more fair to say 3 months, right? 3 months, you're going to know. And let's not waste a year. Let's not waste anybody's time. So say, hey, in 3 months, we're going to sit down and we're going to decide, is this a good fit for you? Do you like it? Are you interested? Are you engaged? From my perspective, are you learning? Are you contributing to the organization? And I'll talk a little bit about what those measurable skills are. But the reason I like to plant that seed is I've seen a lot of people, especially small business owners, where you're like, well, maybe I just haven't given them enough training. I haven't invested enough in them. Let me just keep trying. And so what I want to do is give you a plan so that you'll know, is it going to work? I'll tell you the other example is when you hire a junior and it's not a good fit, they know they don't want to be there. Like I've had a couple people and they're like, man, I just don't get it, right? And that's a struggle. And so what you can do is if you do come to that point where they're like, this is not working for me, he can say, okay, fine, let's find an exit path that makes sense. And then nobody's wasting their time, and you're in a place where you can get somebody who's really going to perform and contribute. Another thing I like to say, and this is interesting, people debate this, but I don't see any reason why they can't be billing 25 hours a week within 3 months. And I'll give you some examples of the type of work they can do so that they're starting, even as they're training, even as they're learning, they're starting to bill. Now again, maybe you're not billing them out at their full rate, right? It's going to take a junior. To this day, I have developers that are 3 times faster than other good seasoned developers, right? So you'll know you're going to have to make an accommodation, but you want to look at the work they're doing and say, you know what, this is valuable work. This is something I can pass on to the client. All right, the other big one is leverage, right? Sometimes what you're looking for is, I've just got to get this off my plate. Where can I find some help that it gives me more room, that it gives my other developers more room, so we can do the work that we want to do? So make a list of just things that you can delegate out. You don't want this person to be a secretary, right? But if they're in the process of learning, if they're in the process of getting up to speed, it's good for them to know what's going on in the business. And anywhere they can buy you time, right? One of the things we did years ago was we just hired an intern who was in training, but we did it for, we said, we're gonna have them answer the phones. Because how many people like it when they're in the middle of coding and the phone rings? Nobody likes that, right? And that limits your productivity. And so it was one of these things where it was like, gosh, all right, that guy is learning FileMaker and he's answering the phones and everybody else benefits from it, right? So you can make a list of things like that. I put some grunt work on here. The other thing I really like is anything that's going to educate them about the process. So if you're writing proposals, if you're doing sales presentations, and they can edit it and review it, it's not just helpful that it improves your quality, it's teaching them about your business. So make a list of that and just make sure that that's kind of part of their job responsibilities. It'll help you kind of clear your plate. All right, the next one I like a lot is encourage shadowing. And what I mean by that is when I'll hire somebody new, I just have them come along with me to meetings, right? I have them sit in with me on any of the calls. Now, again, learning from my mistakes, tell them what you expect them to do, right? If they're just sitting there and then you get out of the meeting and they don't have any to-do items, maybe they haven't learned as much, right? Because they don't know what to listen for. So if I take them to a sales meeting, I'm teaching them, hey, write down the name of everybody at this table, write down what position they have. Do a little research for me to see where you think they're most interested, that kind of thing. At the end of a phone call, their job is to take notes, and what I want them to listen for, here's another one that I do. A lot of times I'll go from meeting to meeting to meeting, and I make a whole bunch of promises in this meeting, and I make a whole bunch of promises in this meeting, and then I get to the afternoon and I'm like, oh, what did I say I was going to do? So that's another thing where you say, hey, anything I promise, write it down, and then either help me deliver on that promise or remind me, right? If I say I'm going to get you this, or I'm going to show you this, or there's a nice link, those are kinds of things that teach them about the process. They're going to watch and see how you interact with the client, and it's also going to ultimately help you because they're helping kind of assist in those issues. All right. Now, implement structured training. All right. So this is where I'm going to talk about specific things you can do. And I'm just going to dive into, here we go. I'm going to dive into just describing the program that I do. It's called Jumpstart FM, and I'm going to give you examples. And one of the things that I think has been really valuable, which is why I created it, is, I love the 3-day training course, right? I love the FileMaker training series. I love the lynda.com videos. But any one of those things, even here at DevCon, by the end of the week, our brains are going to be fried. You're not going to remember everything that happened, and you have all these ideas and you haven't had a chance to really test them out, right? Or if you read through the book, a lot of times there's a tendency for people to just read it and say, oh yeah, I get it. Okay, but it's not, doing it is totally different than understanding it, right? So this is what I said. I said, you know what, it's a 4-week course, and I originally set it up as basically an onboarding service, because a lot of the companies were hiring, again, they didn't have time to do the training themselves, so they would enroll their juniors in my program. What's interesting is over the years, most of the people who take the class now are actually people who are looking to make a career change. So it's kind of switched. They're like, hey, I need this help. And again, the 3-day class is really good, but it's not enough time for me to incorporate everything. So it's a virtual class. I'm using existing resources. I'm going to tell you about all the resources I use. And one of the other things is I provide the feedback. So we meet once a week. We talk about the exercises. At the end of the week, they have an assignment due. They send it to me, and my team reviews it. And then that's one of the things I think is often missing, is we ask juniors to do something, and then we don't necessarily give them the feedback they need to know if they're doing it right. I mean, there's some of the tasks that are binary. Did it work or not? They can figure that out themselves. Did you do it the right way? Did you do it, there's 20 right ways. Could you do it a better way? So those are the kind of things we do. The other thing is, I think it's really important to teach people the full life cycle project. A lot of times you come into a job and you just get put on one project or maybe just one task, and then you have a very narrow idea of what the whole job is about. So this training program, and this is what I'm suggesting, you set up for your juniors, is kind of a project life cycle. So I'll talk you through that. All right. This one is, for some reason it's controversial, but this has been the single biggest thing that helps me train people. So in this training class, or when I hire a junior, I have them give me a daily status report. It's not a 45-page report. It's not very long. It's a couple sentences. It's one paragraph that says, what did I accomplish today? How long did it take? What do I need help with? And what's my goal for tomorrow? And they have to give it to me by 5 o'clock. All right, seems really kind of like, oh, come on, Molly. But what are we teaching them? Hit a deadline, communicate what you've done. There's so many developers, even seasoned developers, that aren't good at articulating what they accomplished, right? And so you've got a client who's waiting for the deliverable. They don't really understand what you're doing all along the way. And you can get in that zone where they're like, what's happening? Are you really producing? And they get frustrated and they get anxious, right? So this is training your junior to be able to articulate what's been achieved, what's going to happen. It's giving me an opportunity to look at what they did and say, boy, that took a little longer than it should have. I need to jump in. And what used to happen is I'd do a weekly status report. Is there an echo back there? Or is that just me? You're good? Okay, good. Thanks, guys. So it gives me an opportunity to see what they're doing. And when I did a weekly report, the problem was I would have an example of the assignment was, all right, we're doing a data migration exercise. And we're going to have to, I want you to learn how to dedupe this huge data set, because we know we've got a whole bunch of duplicates in there. So it's a great exercise, right? They're looking at the data, they're figuring out how to get it in a list view, they're going to figure out how to sort it, maybe they're making some concatenated fields, and then they're learning how to do that dedupe script. So it's a really nice exercise that touches on a lot of different things. And I had one guy that at the end of the week, that's what he achieved in 40 hours. Can you imagine spending when I was like, but the script is on page 35 of the FileMaker 3.0 book that Chris Moyer wrote 10 years ago. So I want to catch that on Monday and be like, oh gosh, I don't want you spinning your wheels. I want you to read the instructions on how to do it and then replicate it, right? Because as much as we all enjoy solving the problem, we got to solve it quicker, right? And if you can find it, replicate it, that's learning, right? And so we also want to teach that mentality that, again, it's okay to ask questions, right? If it's out there, use it, right? You don't have to solve everything yourself. There's plenty of opportunities to solve difficult problems. We don't need to do the easy ones. So this is what will help you catch both that situation where they're spending too much time, or I had an example of another situation. Hey, I want you to send up an invoicing database, right? You got to be able to have the customers and create an invoice, and we're going to do a report on the totals. And gosh, at the end of the week, the kid was done and he'd spent 3 hours. But that's not a 3-hour project, So you can gauge it and say, you're not quite understanding the assignment. I need you to do this additional. All right, so then enough. I don't want to beat that to death. The only other thing I would say is it's interesting how many people won't do this. Right? I've had 40 or 50 people go through my training program, and there's like a 25% of them that they just won't do the status report. Well, guess who doesn't get better? Guess whose assignments aren't very good? Guess who's not reliable in terms of turning in their work? This is not a lot to ask. The next thing, how many people track your time? Okay, almost everybody. There's a handful of people out there that do value pricing. They say, oh, we don't need to track the time, or maybe you're in-house and you don't need to track the time. I would argue no matter what the situation, your junior person needs to track their time. And I want them to track it at the task level. Not, oh, I spent 5 hours on training. Okay? You know, I spent 3 hours watching the first 3 lynda.com videos. That's fair. They're like 45 minutes apiece. You watch the videos, you did the exercise, that kind of thing. And again, and then specific tasks, that dedupe script. Gosh, I worked on this and it took me 3 hours, right? Because I had to reference these materials, and actually I didn't understand this particular component, so I also had to reference this. I'm not asking for like a huge tome on how they spent their time, but what I'm trying to do, again, so that I can gauge it and know if they're on track and see how else I can help them and how else I can point them in the right direction, but I'm also teaching them how to estimate, right? How many people think estimating's easy? Right? Nobody. But you know, I've been doing this for 20 years, so there's a lot, like I can estimate for myself, right? I know how much, and guess what? I'm really good at estimating, and I still screw up all the time, right? I can say that's how much it's gonna take, and it ends up being a lot more. So no matter how good you are at estimating, we can always get better, and this is a skill that you need to work on. So if they start realizing, oh yeah, if I'm gonna make 5 layouts and 3 list views and 2 reports, it's gonna take me all day. And Debbie Zempel, anyone who's interested in estimating, Debbie Zempel's doing a session on estimating where she talks about breaking it down into pieces and prototyping and that kind of thing. So this is the beginning of estimating. This is the beginning of here's how I use my time and here's how I can get better. And it's also fun for the people who really do it. Again, in the class I make them track their training time. The people who do it, they're seeing improvements, right? They're like, wow, it used to take me that long, and now it's not long at all. All right. Teach them how to research. Here's another one, and again, you're kind of going to hear me say the same things over and over again, but there's so much of the time that, you know, if you're not a trainer, right, your impulse is going to be, hey, here's some resources, and go ahead and check them out, and you're going to trust that they really are going to check them out and they're going to try it. It just doesn't work that way, right? You need people to do the work. So my example with research is I say, hey, I'm going to give you a list of 10 different resources, and here's a list of questions I want you to come up with the answers for. And then just tell me where you got the answer. Did you Google it? Did you go to FM Forums? Did you actually ask a question? Like, have them ask a question on FileMaker community. We all know this is an amazing community. I can't believe when people spend time to answer my questions. You know, you're like, wow, you know, what are you doing out there answering my stupid question? But don't be afraid to put that stupid question out. So this is how I teach them. I make them a list and I say, here's 10 questions. You know, what version works on this? What version works on that? They figure out, oh, this is in the help menu. This I gotta ask. This I don't know. And if they come back and they don't know the answers, that's fine. Then we go through it together. How do we find it? Because this is how we learn. The types of problems we're hitting require research. So I'll give you these slides. Here's some of the resources I use. I wanted to point out a couple in particular. I also like to encourage them to go to all the different FileMaker sites because there's some amazing blogs out there. And a lot of times there's a certain blog that speaks to you a little more than another one. So make a list of your favorite resources and check out the blogs. There's, you know, tons of free webinars. So if there's a particular topic, they can get to that webinar. All right. Any questions so far? Yeah, go ahead. I think, so the question is, have you seen the new videos that are coming out? Is that right? Yeah, so I haven't had access to those, but I'm excited about them. I liked, just in the keynote where it was like a snapshot. Here's how to use this. Another thing, like, I know that video training is very effective now. Like, that's why my class is like video training and then we review it. But maybe because I'm old, I don't like to watch a whole video to get to like the answer that it's at minute 30. So I like the idea of its snippets of particular, and I also like, this is the reason I like to have everybody know the different resources, right? You don't have to sit down for a full hour video, check here first. And then you know what, if you're really interested and you need to dig in deeper, then sit down and watch that longer video. So anything else? All right, we'll keep going. All right, so now I'm just gonna dive into exercises. And again, you can have these slides and they're all, again, probably a lot of them are going to be pretty obvious, but it kind of took a while to come together and see which exercises help. So one of the things I do is I start out with a needs analysis, and I actually have, so again, you can bring somebody into a meeting, or you can even do a mock analysis. But in my class, I have them listen in on the analysis. So my husband just started a music school, and we did an interview with him saying, okay, you're going to have to track all the customers that come in, and it's adults and kids, and you got to keep track of parents and students and the related kids and the different relationships. So we have that conversation, and at the end of it, I sit down and I give them a list, and I say, you know what, we're gonna have you build a contact database, right? And look, I'm gonna show you, because look at this. All right, everybody estimate. This is 10 minutes for me to build it, right? I've been developing for 20 years. So I can sit down for 10 minutes and show them, look, we make fields, and guess what? The phone number is a text field, right? Because you're not gonna add it, you're not gonna do anything with it, so it's a text field. So you whip through and you show them how to make a checkbox, and you show them how to do a value list and how to enter a default value. And that's 10 minutes, and they're looking over your shoulder or looking at a little video I made. And then they have the list of here's the exercise to do. And then you say, okay, I want you to go build it. And guess what? You can reference the FileMaker training series, chapter 1, 2, and 3. And lynda.com video 3 and 4 also talk about this. And if you get stuck on anything, you can Google, you know, what's the difference between a checkbox and a radio button. But I don't want you to start there. I don't want you to sit down and watch the videos from start to end. I want you to open up FileMaker and build this thing. And let's see how long, what can you get done in 3 hours? And I like to give them a little time box too. Just tell me what you can get done. You're not in trouble if you get nothing done, but I don't want you to spend all week figuring out what to do. So you give them that, and again, this is just like that little jump, and you'll see it with the people who kind of catch our FileMaker fever, where they're like, oh, well, I know you said I only had to do this, but guess what? I kept going because this was fun, and this was interesting, and look what else I did. So again, I just say, just get in there and do it. I had, you know, on the one hand, points for being clever, but I had one guy in class at the end of the week, he turned in his assignment, and it was the database I built. It was the example, and I was like, wow, that looks kind of exactly like what I did. He's like, well, yeah, I understood it. I was like, that's not what I asked you to do. So anyway, he didn't work out. All right, so now my next exercise, build a flashcard database. I love this one because, right, we want everybody to be certified, and it's a really hard test that I just passed, yes. So it's a really hard test, but anyway, you get the flashcard database, same thing, you're gonna build this. What do you see in here? Okay, a couple buttons they haven't done before, a couple scripts, maybe we're gonna use some hiding, and then you're gonna say, all right, now optimize this for iPad, or optimize it for your iPhone, so you can, while you're riding the train, you can run through the questions. And we're gonna have you import the, you know, I have all the questions from the back of the FileMaker training series, or a whole bunch of sample questions from the help section. Chris Ippolite's doing a prep session on certification, so he'll talk about all the different resources you want in there. Have them import those in, and then they've got somewhere to study, plus they've learned some new skills in FileMaker. Now the other thing, and I gotta show you this one, is Jake here? No. So one of the other students, look what he did with his flashcard database. I love this class because what I do is I give an assignment, and they can do basic, medium, or advanced. This guy liked design, right? So look what he did with his flashcard database. It's beautiful. And he had a lot of fun with it, right? And he's got a great job now. So the other thing about your exercises is you don't have to limit the junior. You know, give them a chance to try what's most interesting to them, and you'll just be amazed by some of the stuff that people come up with. All right, next section. How am I doing? I'm doing okay for time here. The next section is data modeling. This one, you know, I'm just going to admit this. So I started at FileMaker 2.0, and we went to FileMaker 3, and I just did not get the relational model at all. It didn't make sense to me, right? I can remember sitting there and looking at it and trying to figure it out, and it didn't make sense. So what I ended up doing, I was like, all right, I've got to figure this thing out, is I just started copying, right? I would look at one, and I would do exactly what it did, and I would see what popped up in the portal. You know, why is that field coming up? What is this? Until, you know, kind of a light bulb went out. And for me, it was a little bit of rote, right? I did it enough times that then it started to make sense. The other point I want to make is if you think about the projects that have taken you the most time, I think the bulk of it is if you haven't figured out the data model. Has anyone ever done this, because I know I have, where you build it out and then you get to a point where the client asks you for a report and you realize you cannot achieve that data because of the way you modeled it. Okay, these are the ones, hey, let's teach our juniors what the data model is, right? We don't have to reinvent it every single time. There are books that tell you how to do, an inventory model, a purchase order model, a contact model. So show them what it is. Again, there's plenty of problems to solve. You don't have to make them figure out everything from scratch. And again, as you're doing this, the repetition is going to help them build that understanding. So a couple examples I do, I literally say, all right, here's 6 ERDs. And what you're going to do in this example, you're going to make a detail record for the contact, and then you're going to have a portal that shows the appointments. And won't it be cool to use that new feature that we're not talking about? But that's going to make data modeling a lot easier, isn't it? But you want them to understand the guts. You want them to understand how to get under the hood and do it. So I do contacts to appointments. I do an invoice one, right? And all of these, the other reason I chose them is A, they're in almost every system you build. I mean, what database doesn't have some form of contacts in it? B, there's a lot of modules, or there's a lot of data models that you just see over and over again, so you want to do those. And these are the examples in any of the training materials you'll see. So they're going to have plenty of options to look at it, to review it, and do kind of that copying that, that I did to teach myself. The other example I do is time entry. Like, I think this is a fun one because if you tell somebody, and again, this is kind of dating, but we used to have the paper timesheets. A lot of times they'll stick in like a timesheet table. And this is a nice opportunity to say, hey, you know what, you don't need that, right? That's just a presentation layer. You're going to keep track of individual records, and then we're going to show it in a different view. Your actual data model is just employee has multiple time entries, okay? So these are examples you do, and what I ask them to do out of it is, again, the detail, a list view, and show me that portal. And then you can have the questions about, all right, should you have cascading delete on? Are they going to be able to create it? Are you going to do it differently on the graph? So these data modeling exercises are really important so that a year from now, when they're a pretty good developer and you pop into a new project, they've got something to reference back to. All right. I think we're doing okay for time, right? Yeah, we've got time. I got more exercises for you. So the next, assign some technical tasks. And these are a bunch of them. So let's talk about QA. Day one, right? You've hired this junior developer. Day one, this is something they can do, right? Quality assurance is really important, and you give them a list of here's all the things I want you to check in this database, because when they're actually developing for themselves, they need to do this anyway, right? It's very hard to check your own work, but guess what? There's some things that you need to do that just cannot be, that you just can't be avoided. Is your tab order okay? Is everything aligned okay? How about this one? I don't mean to trip them up, but when you're testing, log in with a different password, right? You can't test that script in full access and think you're going to have the same results as the different access levels you set up. So have them log in with each different level of security and test X number of functions. It does a couple things. Again, you might have a developer that's so good that you're like, we don't really need to test their work because I know they've already done it themselves. But this is training for your junior. And PS, even the very best of developers are going to miss something, right? So this is a nice way to implement that quality assurance that you don't necessarily have time for when you're spinning. And again, I just give them a very specific list. Do this. All right, layout work. Layouts are another one that's, I've seen people that are very precise. I'm a little bit sloppy. Like my first round will be to just get the fields on there. Is this what you want? I ask the client, are those the right fields? Not really, okay. I don't want to waste the time lining it up and making it look pretty and making it sort. And that happens to be how I put it together. So it's very helpful for me to say, hey, it's all on there. Can you make it look good? Can you make sure everything works? Can you make sure the field sizes make sense? Put some data in there so it's not like squishing something into somewhere else. Put a calendar drop down on there for me. So that tends to be very helpful for me. Other people are more precise and it's harder to delegate. Then you can just, I would suggest that you just sketch it out on paper. Like, don't do it yourself, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to train this person. It is going to maybe take you a little more time. This is one of the mindsets you have to get past. If I just did it myself, right? If I did it myself, it would only take a half hour, and it's going to take him like 3 hours, and plus I'm going to spend a half hour teaching him how to do it. You have to get past that and look at the longer term. And the other thing, this helps me a lot because I really fall victim to that. Like, oh, I just got to get it done. But I look at my calendar and I say, you know what, realistically, I'm not going to get to that until next Friday, right? So if I'm not going to get to it for 2 weeks, and I give it to her, and she gets it done before 2 weeks, we're ahead of schedule, right? So you just kind of, you got to trick yourself a little bit. But sometimes it's been hard to let go. And so these are examples where you go, you know what, if they don't get anything done, I'm still not going to be in trouble with the client because I still have time to do it. And boy, if they get it done, that's going to look great, right? Because I'm ahead of schedule. So aligning, navigation, that kind of thing. All right. Do I have any other people out there that like data migration? Yes, there's like 2 of us. I just find it really interesting because one of the things, and I know a lot of developers shy away from this because it is a dangerous territory to say, oh yeah, I'll help you with your data, right? But at the end of the day, if you're not getting some data in their system, they're not using the system, you're not completing the job, and they're not happy, right? So you want to carefully determine how much data you're going to help them with. But the reason I like it, and I like this exercise, is there's so many opportunities for them to learn. Right? If you get an Excel spreadsheet and a Word document of students and their parents, there's a nice opportunity to combine that. You can teach them different functions, left words, right words, trim, get rid of those stupid paragraph returns. You're teaching them how to use the replace function to clean things up. And we already talked about the duplicates. I think that's a really important exercise because it translates to other types of functions you're going to use. And the other thing is creating sub-summaries is a way to find kind of off data, right? You've got a type, and there's managers and management and manager, right? So they're going to see that in a sub-summary, then they're going to learn how to replace it, and you're learning different ways to manipulate the data, which will then translate into helping your client, training your client, and again, bringing that client's level of satisfaction up much higher, right? Especially a lot of the clients I work with, I think it's because I work with a lot of integration projects, and the thing is, you can have the best system in the world, but if the data's not right, it's not useful. So this is a great exercise. It's something, as you saw in this room, it's something not everybody likes to do, right? So have your junior learn it. It's part of a training experience. This one maybe is a little hard for juniors, but the idea of normalizing data, right? When sometimes you've got to split out parents and kids and match them up, and it just came in like a, PTO Word document. This is another good, and it's a technically challenging exercise. All right, reports. Reports are another great one. They're one of the things that we kind of wait till the end, right? And so you can define what that report needs to do. You can sketch out what it looks like. And then remember when you first learned, you're just trying to figure out the difference between, is it a calculated summary or is it a summary field? And why won't it show up? And sometimes it does. Oh, I forgot to sort it. These are the kind of examples that if you give them the examples of doing the reporting, they're going to learn some of those tricks of the trade as they go through it. And a basic report, the scripting, the finding, the exporting, those are all really important. So I will give, just depending on how in-depth we get in the class, I'll give them an example of 6 different reports to produce. And reports can be really time-consuming, but again, it's a place to bring it all together. All right, imports and exports. I think this is helpful too. I think sometimes we're missing out on opportunities to cleanly get data out. And so this is a nice example of teaching them how to navigate a system and figure out where the field comes from. Right? It's not always in your base table. You've got a tunnel, and you got to export it. And then guess what? The client hates that the field name says, underscore, underscore, blah, blah, blah. So how do you make a calculation field to make that look good and export it? So these are examples of another type of very simple, it's not just, hey, how do you export? Save as Excel. That's great, they need to know that, but I want to push them a little further to kind of get under the hood and do those exports. Importing is another great one. There's a trick there to figure out, am I importing new, am I importing matching, what's going to happen when I do that? Learning that trick that imports are going to come in no matter what. Your validation isn't going to work, so be careful. Learning to make a copy of the file before you do it. That's another one we learned. All right. The next one is providing tier 1 support. And this might be a little frightening depending on what your client base is. But again, we had that person answering the phone. And honestly, my experience is if I'm a customer and I'm making a request, maybe I have a tech request list and I'm making a request, if somebody responds right away and says, hey, we got it, we can't get to it, Joe can't look at it for a couple of days, but I wanted to let you know it's on his list, that is much more satisfying than putting the request in and not hearing anything for 3 days. So again, this is delivering a higher level of quality. Your customer is going to complain if they waste an hour talking to your tier 1 support, like when you call Comcast and you're really mad about, right? You don't want that, but if you're having them check in, okay, what's the problem? Can you help me define it? You know what, could you send a screenshot? Like how many times do you have people say, it just doesn't work, right? Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody say, hey, great, what do you mean by that? Can you send me a screenshot? Who was the user? What, when did it happen? Is it happening all the time? Oh, it's just happened once, and it's a brand new user, and they could have hit the delete button. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of basic questions they can ask to keep things moving, and that's good training for them as well. So if that's a possibility to monitor a tech request list, to take the tier 1 calls, it's really, really good training. Like, you don't learn any faster than when you're on the spot, right? I think about the times where I just figured out my FileMaker 3, and I would go into the client, and I just had to figure it out. I had to perform, because everything was in person then, right? So this is helpful if you can do it, and you know which client it makes sense for. You don't want to bother people, but if you can pull that off, this is great. All right, my next, how do you know if it's working? Again, I told you in 3 months you should know, right? So a couple signs for me, mostly, and there are measurable things you can look at, but for me it's always like, are they asking the right questions? One of the guys who sent his junior to my training class, he called me up and he's like, Molly, it's working. And I said, oh, great, what are you seeing? He's like, he just came into my office and said, hey, do you prefer the if statement or the case statement? Right? And I was like, that's it. Like, he's still thinking about a really obscure thing, and I love that. The other thing, I want to see him make mistakes. But I want to see him fix those mistakes, right? I made a mistake, and guess what? I tried again. Or I made a mistake, and I'm stuck, and can you help me figure it out? As opposed to just kind of keeping mistakes and being like, hopefully nobody's going to notice. There's measurable progress. How are their timesheets doing? Are they doing their status reports on time every day? That matters, right? Are they, how far have they made it through their training materials? Are they getting the exercises done on time? All that's measurable. But the gut for me is always, the other one is, getting an email from the one student at midnight, and she's like, I had to get up out of bed because I figured it out, right? And she went down and figured it out, and the calculation worked, and there was that sense of pride. It's like, all right, that's it. Now, you're not going to get everybody as enthusiastic as we are. Some people just, it's a job, and they're going to get it done, and you'll be able to see that through the measurable ones. But if you're not seeing some of this, you got to have the talk. You got to have the talk. Nobody wants to waste time in an environment that they're not necessarily suited for. All right. So my quick summary here is, hire for aptitude, hire for communication fit, hire somebody that you think is going to enjoy being part of this world. Make sure to define their expectations. Give clear instructions. Frequent feedback is so much more important. Like whenever, I'm too busy and I don't pay attention to what they're doing for a week, they're feeling lost, they're not achieving what they could achieve, and I'm missing opportunities to train them. So both, positive feedback and corrections, and then monitor their progress. All right, just a couple things. I put my website up here. This Elusive Moose is the one where a lot of my training materials go through that, and there's a mailing list if you want to pop onto that mailing list. I'm doing 2 different courses. The one is what we just went through, the junior developer, and then I also have one for power users. So that one's actually going to be probably more for your clients, right? The person who needs to do reporting, who needs to better understand how to maintain server, so that you can have a better relationship with the clients that you're serving, and they can feel more confident about what they're asking for. These slides will be up there, but I'm not going to change them anymore from there unless somebody has something they want me to do, right? Thank you for your time. And then we've got the microphone here. If anyone has questions, we've got some time. If you want to step up, I'm happy to, and I'd also love to hear about your experience. If anyone has particularly successful exercises they've used. So thanks, everybody.
Oh, that is on. Okay, can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Ethan.
Great material, Molly. I'm curious, would you recommend having a junior be remote? And if so, how would you adapt your program to fit that?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's a great question. In general, have your junior in your office, right? They can look over your shoulder, they can talk, if you have more people in the office, if it's not just you, they can talk to somebody else, and there's a real value in like watching somebody code. But I would not completely limit it to that, because through this virtual training program, I've really been able to assess if people can do a good job or not. My caveat would be the people who have done best in the training program, they're either, I tell you, the second career folks. Those are the people who are self-motivated. They know exactly what needs to be done. They already know their work schedules. Or the people who have been sent by a company where they're like, okay, I'm getting performance review on this. Remote is more difficult. Does anybody have a remote junior right now? You do, okay. So you figure out ways to work it, but it's certainly so much easier. I mean, think about how much time you save just here. You're sitting at lunch and you throw out a question and somebody knows the answer. So that's my thought. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Yeah. Really, I have a question going back to the beginning of deciding, do I hire a junior or do I hire someone a little more advanced? And you went through the slide that showed the maybe cost difference.
Right.
But I mean, what are the reasons, or how do you know whether to hire a junior? And it's just me, and I actually have a sub a little bit, but it's really, or do you in the beginning, before you have a few people, do you maybe go for someone more experienced?
Well, it's a great question. I would say it depends on kind of your longer term goals, right? If you're, here's one thing, there was particular work I don't like doing. Right? I got tired of making, there was one point where I was like, if I have to make another contact database, I don't want to do it, right? I want somebody to do some of this work so I can concentrate on other things. So that was a big one for me, is just like the type of work I wanted to be able to concentrate on and where I wanted to grow with my company. So right now, for me, I just have high-level devs, right? Because we have particular projects and I want to be able to hand it off and we dive into it. Years ago, when I was building up the company and I wanted to grow, I had a couple of juniors, right? Because I could hand things off to them. I had the time to invest in them. And the one thing about it is if you really train somebody up good, then they're going to go get a job somewhere else and make a lot more. So keep an eye on that, right? You get somebody really good and you're like, wow, now I can't afford you. How did that happen? I must have done a really good job, right? And then you can be proud of them, and then you decide if you want to start over. So I don't know if that helps exactly, but I would say make sure you think about, what do you want right now? Like, do you have time? Do you enjoy it? Like, I love training juniors. Like, it's kind of exciting for me. I don't have time for it right now, right? And does it make sense for you to have a shadow? Look at those logistics, right? If some of that could come off your plate and you're training somebody, is that helpful, right? I think you had a question. Do you mind using the microphone? Just because they're recording.
So a lot of your comments have focused on a consultancy onboarding juniors.
Yeah.
I'm an in-house developer with a system that we would not bring a junior in, give them a full access password, and say let's start working.
Right.
Because that would be professionally irresponsible. Multiple websites, multiple servers, multiple files would have problems.
Yeah.
So how would you bring somebody into an existing highly complex system with limited or no experience and onboard them? I understand we can do some sample projects and stuff, without the live files, but at some point they have to make that jump to working on something that's actually productive for the business. How do you make that jump without letting them burn down the house?
It's a great question. And I might argue, I'm not sure if you have the opportunity to do that, right? If your whole system is mission critical, right, and there's not, a couple questions for you would be, is there new development, right? If there's ongoing new development where you can implement modules and implement them, in a staged environment, that's a way, because you can start to see them build it up. But you can tell I don't want to say no, right? Because I've seen it happen. But it might not be the right time, right? Do you have other work for that person? Could you say, hey, while you're learning FileMaker, and we have a few tier 1 support things that we're going to have you do, and I'm going to teach you that every time you make a new layout, you're going to duplicate it, and you're not going to implement it till I approve it, right? We have a process for that. If you can do that, and you have other work that they can do, you can afford the time for them to get up to speed. But the other thing, just based on what you're saying there, it's probably been built over a couple of years, hasn't it? Yeah, it's a lot tougher for a junior to. I'll tell you what, it's way easier for me to look at a FileMaker 6 system than it is for any new person. They're like, what is going on here, right? What's a repeating field, right? Or not me. Even if you've got it real cleaned up, there's still going to be detritus that's going to be hard for them to track. So my answer is not no. My answer is, do you have enough work that they can be useful to you while they're being trained up? And probably, there's other types. I would say you're not going to do a brand new, fresh $35,000 junior. You could also get a junior with 2 years experience, right? I've seen people come in, they've got about 2 years experience, they know enough, and then you're training them on that system, and they become experts on that system as opposed to experts on FileMaker in general. So. Well, this is interesting. I'm just going to repeat it for the people in back. So one, he's saying, hey, have an offline development copy. Is there anybody here that has dev prod environment? Okay, if you've got dev prod, you're in better shape, right? If you don't, like we do a lot of live, these huge systems, you do a lot of live development, that's dangerous, right? But if you do have dev prod, and especially if we see some things coming forward, or if you go to 360works and see what they're up to, that might make a difference too, where we actually have data models where they're going to be able to push over the changes, right? So you get an in-between there. And then did I interrupt you? Did you want to add something else? I think that was it. Okay, great. Do you have another question? Tall.
I have a sort of similar situation where I wouldn't have wanted to bring somebody on to a pretty complex system, but I also learned this is a system that had been running for about 13 years and had gotten pretty complicated, and brought the person on. They'd done programming in, another language or two, and so on. Yeah. And just another little kernel. They were very good at doing a new add-on, a new module, a new piece.
Right.
That turned out great. But of course, what I was hoping for was help desk, right?
Yeah.
Just, why isn't that record showing? Why can't I print my staging ticket? Why can't, whatever this crap is, right?
Right.
And the system, that was hard to train. That was really super hard to train, that sort of back-end data problem fix.
Yeah.
So I'm just sort of saying a little caveat there because that really required in-depth understanding of the data and where the data can go bad. Now, and trust me, for 13 years I've put every stop I can possibly, not everyone obviously, but to make those people not do that. But they still do it.
Yeah.
So
what I would suggest there is this is also like in that first 3 months, you're going to find out where people's specialties are. There's some people that are going to dive under the hood and they're going to figure out programming and they're going to be great. And there's other people that are really good with QA, testing. Like, I've got a guy who could do QA that you would never even think, and he'll figure out very much from a user perspective. So that's another thing to evaluate. It's a great point. As you're hiring the person, as you're evaluating them, are they a customer service person? Are they a problem solver? Are they do they have some subject matter expertise? You might benefit by bringing in someone who has subject matter expertise if you're maintaining a huge system. They're going to be more sensitive to how a change is going to affect the users, which in another system doesn't matter as much. I don't want to say it doesn't matter how it's going to affect the users, but if there's certain subject matter expertise and you've got somebody who's already got that, they're going to be able to make those decisions better.
Thanks for the session.
You're welcome.
Do you have any feedback as far as a recommendation, whether there's a benefit to maybe taking on 2 junior developers? Do they help feed? Yeah, okay, great.
Yes.
Take that away if you would.
Yeah, hiring 2 at the same time has actually been great because then they tend to work off each other. They can ask questions together. They can compare notes. Like if you get the right synergy going between them, and plus you're training 2 people at once. So if you can afford to do it and you bring it in, I've found that to be really helpful. the only problem is if one is way better than the other one, and then at your 3-month review, you're making some decisions, but that's life.
Maybe that's a good strategy, survival of the fittest.
Right. Yeah, puts a little competition in there, like I like that.
I'm another in-house developer. We do a lot of custom web publishing. Two-part
Okay.
question. Is it possible to find a junior person and train them up to do custom web stuff, PHP, API integrations, things like that? Or is it possible to find somebody who is a PHP developer
Yeah.
or a JavaScript developer and somehow get them up to speed on FileMaker so they can take, the new API, the new FileMaker data API or the PHP API and start up and running?
I think the second one is easier. Like, it'd be easier to teach a PHP person FileMaker than a junior PHP. But I'm not a web developer, so I got a couple of people to introduce you to who've done just that. So just wait afterwards, and I'll give you some names, because I think you want to talk to a web developer about like what hands off easily. The nice thing about the web development, a lot of these kids are coming out of college with that programming expertise, right? So you can find web developers, whereas right now we can't find FileMaker developers. So, but yeah, I've got some names for you. Anybody else?
All right, thanks, Molly, for doing this.
Yeah.
My question is, do you have any guidance or what have you seen in terms of how you help juniors bill? What strategies you do? Is it you bill a fraction of the time? The basic problem being they aren't as proficient as a average, intermediate, or advanced developer. So you have to defend that value proposition to your customers. So what do you recommend?
All right, great question. So this depends on the client. In general, if I'm billing, right, I'm billing for the task. I don't want here's what I don't want. I don't want the client who is just receiving the product from me. Like, you're not on site working with them with the junior and he sees, oh, that guy's slower, right? We had, years ago when I worked with Bob Bowers, like, Bob would go out and the client would be like, yeah, don't send anybody else. We just want Bob. And we're like, well, he can't be the one programming. Of course, he's 5 times faster than anybody else. So you don't want the situation where they're nitpicking. If it's obvious, you have to do a marker. But so here's the example. If I'm billing for a task, I'm going to bill at my full rate. But I'm going to say, let's say the junior I know that that task should have been 1 hour at 175. And it took my junior 3 hours. I'm going to bill the client 1 hour at 175. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't want to be like tricky about it, but like, it is like internally you're discounting their time, and unless you have to, like I've said to the client, I'll say, hey, listen, I've got a junior person. I'm not going to bill you for all their time. I'm going to bill you for what we believe the task is worth. And a lot of times I'll say, I'm going to estimate the task. How long would it take me to do it? That's how much I'm going to charge for. Now there's other things like QA. Guess what? It takes what it takes. This is how long it's going to take, right? Or so the goal is to get that junior up to the estimate that you've created. And I think that that's a better way to do it, because what'll happen is, because I've tried this, right? Oh, I've got a junior on it. Well, a year later, the junior's not a junior. He's awesome. And they're like, well, you can't raise his rate from $50 an hour to $175, and you can't blame them, right? But I prefer to give them the estimate on the task level, so that also I like them to be more concentrated on what's being achieved as opposed to how many hours have been spent. Does that make sense? So hopefully that's helpful. Hello.
Yes, I'm Taylor Sharp. One question, interesting thing that I run into, the problem that you're kind of touching on, is the issue of having a junior doing something, and then the customer comes back, and of course they recognize that as the senior developer, like they're used to having me there, that I'm fast, and they,
right.
And then they come back, and the tension you get is they say, well, I know I like your junior developer, but we only need you. We don't want.
Yeah.
Well, how do you approach? Because I run into this a whole lot. What are your strategies for approaching positive spins on bringing getting them customers to accept the junior and realize I'm not going to screw them. I'm going to
Yeah.
But how to make that sales pitch?
I straight up, I go and I sit down with them and I say, guess what? I'm very fortunate. My business is growing, right? And right now, because they probably have already noticed, you can tell it's taking me a lot longer to deliver, right? Maybe you don't have that situation, but I would have a situation where I'm like, yeah, I used to call you back in a day, and now I email you and say, can I help you in 2 weeks? right? So the point is, hey, my business is growing. I want to continue to deliver great customer service to you. I'm bringing somebody else on. I'm going to QA their work, but they're going to have a better response time. We're going to be able to address your needs better. And yeah, there's going to be a little ramp up time, and guess what? I'm going to discount that time. So again, we can talk about what it looks like and what tasks it needs to be. And please give me feedback on their performance. Maybe they're going to shadow me for a while and I don't bill you for that time. But I do tend to be very upfront about that if they're going to have an interaction with them, right? But if I'm behind the scenes and I can pass tasks to my junior and then I test them and I still deliver them, I don't feel like I need to, the work is getting done. So however the work is. But I have a feeling you're talking to them in person and they're like, yeah, we just want you, we'll wait. And I've had that one too, where they're like, yeah, I get that, but I'll just wait. And I'm like, I can't come out here to do 2 more layouts. Like, I can't do that.
Yeah, it's a thing I struggle with. I'm at that size of a business where I'm trying to pass off and bring juniors in to do things, but it's real hard for me. I struggle, and I know this is where other independent developers come up that have worked by themselves for a long time, and then you try to grow out, but you're used to being.
You got to be very confident.
I do it all. How do you really start moving your business out and bringing other people into the fold and properly passing it off? Because I struggle wanting to say, oh, I know I can just do this, and then I don't pass it off to my junior guys, then they don't do anything, and they don't grow.
Yeah. No, and you have to be confident in that. If you're saying, hey, I want to grow, right, this is what I want to do, is that you can develop much better service for your client. I mean, at the end of the day, let's face it, like the client that I'm the only one that knows their database inside and out and they love me, what are they doing while I'm at DevCon? Because I'm not calling them back. You know what I mean? Like that's not great customer service. So there is a huge benefit for the client to avoid that hit by the bus.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah, you're like, listen, this is important. This is a mission critical system for you. I've got to have somebody else involved. And sure, there's a bunch of other developers they could call, but you're not going to get up to speed on a legacy system that you've been building for 20 years, right? So, it's interesting to say. It's not just about you saying, oh my God, I'm so busy, I got to get somebody else. It's like, boy, the whole reason we're growing is to deliver better service to this client, right? And here's what matters. You're going to have backup. You're going to have faster response time. I'm going to QA their work. I'm going to be able to, guess what? I get to think about some of those bigger issues that we always say we're going to talk about when we get this module implemented, right? I become a strategic advisor for you. So you can make that call very effectively. And again, it's not just about passing the work on. It's about how do you deliver great service to that client. So how are we doing for time? 10:04, hey. Well, listen, I'm going to turn it off, but I will stay here if you have questions because I think there's a break till 10:30. So again, thanks everybody. I hope this was helpful and have a great day. Hey.